Hey, it's Brandon. Today we're sculpting best girl Tsuyu Asui from My Hero Academia.
I told you to call me Sue.
Tsuyu Asui! Her quirk, frog!
She's everyone's favorite frog girl with the superpower frog!
Obviously I can jump high and cling to pretty much any wall. And of course there's my tongue. I can stick it out about 20 meters. Oh yeah, and I can spit out my stomach so I can clean it. That's not really useful.
Pretty gross, but let's forget that last point and model her anyways. To start off, I'm going to drop in a human meta rig so I can know how large to scale my reference. I just did a little search on Google for Froppy, My Hero Academia, turnaround, and eventually came up with this front and side view. Once you have your reference positioned on the front and the side and kind of moved out of the way, we can start blocking out our base mesh. Now you can use as much geometry and shapes as you want when you're blocking out your head. I tend to try my best to use one big sphere for the head and then another kind of deformed sphere for the muzzle. But you can add as many shapes as you want because we're going to be combining all these together later and it's going to make new geometry anyways. So no need to keep it super clean. We'll make a bean shape for the upper torso. We'll just flip it upside down to be the bottom half of the torso. And just keep on adding more geometry for the legs and the feet. And this is really where good references come into play. The more angles and the more accurate your references that you're going by are, the less thinking you have to do. And the less thinking you have to do, the quicker you're going to move. I'm going to use the side reference to get the shape of her arm. And since her hand isn't sprawled out into like a high five to where you can see all the fingers separated, we're just going to kind of guess the shape of the digits and where everything should be placed. Now you don't have to go over crazy trying to tweak things to get them perfect, because like I said before, we're going to be combining everything together when we remesh later, and it's all going to turn it into one giant piece of geometry. So really we can use as many shapes as we want, and we can be as sloppy as we want. So let's throw the arms over. We'll put a mirror modifier on so we don't have to do another arm. And I noticed that I forgot to give her a butt, and nobody deserves a flat butt, so let's go ahead and throw a sphere in there and kind of plump her butt cheeks up a little bit. Now we can move on to the baubles. Now it's normally just a sphere where you just stretch the top up a little bit, kind of make a teardrop shape that kind of, flows forward. No big deal. So now let's apply all the modifiers and join everything together except for the hands. I'm going to leave the hands out right now. But everything's joined together. We bring it into sculpt mode. We start remeshing so we can smooth everything out, start defining a few small things, and start toning up other things. Now a lot of this body is going to be underneath clothes, so you don't have to go super crazy on details. That's one of the best things about stylized characters, is that you don't have to be super accurate to realism. But I mean, you want it to look nice though. So just as long as you got your shapes and your silhouettes the way that you need them, everything's going to be fine. Moving on to the head, we're going to combine the two shapes, remesh them, smooth everything out. We'll pull up a little spot for the nose, start carving out the eyes. And I'm actually going to move my reference of the front view over so I can see about what the shape of her eyes are. And I'm making the eyes just a little bit bigger than they're supposed to be. This isn't a technique or anything, I just thought she would look cool with just a little bit bigger eyes. Now we start kind of pulling her eye sockets out around her eyes. We'll define her mouth a little bit and just smooth around, pulling out her cheeks, a little bit of detail around her lips and her chin. And if you find you hit a wall with the detail, you might need to remesh at a higher remesh. So we're building out the jaw, trying to make that jaw line, kind of poking out the chin a little bit, puffing up the cheeks, defining the lips just a little bit more, maybe give her more of a bottom lip, and the eyelids. Now, you don't have to go crazy with detail, because when we retopologize this thing, we're going to lose a lot of the fine details. And it's also going to hide a lot of the wobbliness around the eyelids that are coming up in the sculpt. It'll kind of even all that out, so you don't have to go crazy and obsess too much over the details. At least not at this point. So it's about this time I like to add in the irises to the model, because it looks kind of ghostly to just see these big eyes staring with no irises, no pupils. And we'll add some eyebrows in there too. The more the more face-like it looks, the less creepy it looks. Which I know she still looks pretty creepy, but just about anything you model around this stage is gonna look creepy. For like maybe 90% of the time you're modeling, it'll look creepy, and then that final 10% near the end, that's when it starts to look right. So most of the face is pretty well finished by now. We'll just leave it as a sculpt, wet a sphere, and start dragging out some hair. Luckily Asui's hair is pretty simple. It's just one giant piece of hair in the back, and then a big strand in the middle, two smaller strands on the side. So it's pretty quick and easy to block these parts out. Okay, so we've got enough done on the head. Let's switch back to the body. We'll combine the body with the hands, and we will remesh it. That way they're connected. And I had a little bit of trouble here with the finger. It's after I used quad remesher to lower the topology, it kind of webbed out at the finger. So I had to go in and manually fix some of the geometry. So we're just focusing on everything from the neck down. So let's bring in the human meta rig. We'll get the arms in place, and we'll get the bones to kind of match up where we need them to be. We've got to delete the face rig too, otherwise we might get an error later. But matching up the bones with every piece of the body is pretty simple. The fingers of the hands can be just a little bit tricky, so when you go to side view, you'll have to hide all the bones except for the finger that you're actually working on. And it's kind of a little bit of guesswork to get them perfectly in there. Just remember to rotate and orbit around the viewport, just so you can make sure that you got it at all the angles. The closer you get these things to where they need to be, centered of the mesh, the closer they are, when you actually parent the bones with automatic weights, the better they're going to deform. Generated the rig, and then parent the mesh to the rig with automatic weights. So now I'm just testing some of the deformations to see how close it got and stuff, and how much I'm actually going to have to fix when I apply the armature modifier. So really I'm just testing to see what I can get away with just posing with the rig. But yeah, it seems good enough. I'm going to be able to use it. So now we're going to try to get this thing in the pose that we want. We're going to kind of go with a reference image in the back, kind of a combination of the front and the side, which they're two different poses, but we're going to kind of combine them both, having the legs posed as the front reference image, and then we'll kind of use the side image for the hand. She's always doing this pose in the anime where she's got her one finger up to her lip whenever she talks. I don't know why that's a frog thing. I don't normally see frogs doing that, but that's what she does. But yeah, just a bunch of minute little bitty movements and stuff, and we want to get this thing exactly where we want it before we apply the armature modifier, because once we apply it and there's no going back, that's where the mesh is. So the head's just a little bit too big, and we're going to resize it just a little bit, try kind of make it match right. We'll turn the head just a little bit. I'm using a path with just a regular circle for the geometry reference to make those two loops on the back of her hair. I don't know how hair can be tied like that. I mean, normally it would probably just fall and be super droopy and stuff. She must use a lot of hairspray, but it looks cool in the anime, I guess. So now I'm selecting all of the section that's going to become the blazer, just like the Dipper model that I did. It was pretty well the same thing. I just selected her torso all the way out to her hands, and then duplicated it, added a solidify modifier, that way it thickens it up. And right now it just looks like a really ugly sweater. But we'll work on that, we'll get it fixed up. I split it down the middle, and then I filled in all the gaps. And I split it down the middle, that way I'll be able to overlap the front. So we'll just rub on this jacket just a little bit and get it about where we want, make it fit just right. Go around to the back of the thing, kind of shove a lot of the geometry over on top of the other part. That way when you remesh it, it's going to combine it. And on the front, leave one side of the jacket sticking out forward, because I mean that's the whole point of doing this, is that way we have that overlapping look. And then for all the detail after this, we're going to be using the multi-res modifier. And I usually do all my multi-res sculpting on level 3. But this will be the last time that we're going to be remeshing or using quad remesher or anything like that. So this is where your final details are coming in, at least on this jacket part. So you can start working on all your creases, you can start working on your folds for the arms and stuff like that. So it's looking pretty good. I'm going to go into the body mesh again. I'm going to copy just a couple pieces of the wrist. I'm going to duplicate it and separate it. And once it's separated, I'm going to add the modifier solidify to puff it back out to make it larger than the wrist, and that's going to be the undershirt or the cuff. We'll add a single vert, and we'll go all the way around the inside part of this collar with snapping to faces turned on. We'll go further on around the collar, but in the actual shape of the lapel, trying to match up the number of vertices, that way when we go to fill in all the faces, they'll all match up. And down here at the bottom, you have to play around a little bit just to get one to overlap the other one just right. Add a solidify modifier to puff out the lapel. Adding a couple planes here just for the pocket flaps, just to kind of fake out this is where pockets are. We start off with a circle and then checker select, which selects every other vert. And then you scale it in, twist it, and then you subdivide just one side of all those, and you pull it out and it starts to look like a saw blaze. Put the bottom of the skirt where you want it to be, extrude straight up, scale it down, and then just at the top ring of verts, with loop tools enabled, you relax the selection. You can kind of rotate it a little bit and it'll give it a little bit of a twist. And at the top I turned on snapping and I just clicked every single vert in order to snap it to her torso. Next up, you can come down the skirt just a little ways, add a loop cut, and scale it out that way. It's got room for the butt. And if you need to, add more loop cuts to kind of poof it out or do whatever you need. Next, we take all the vertical lines and select them all in edge select mode and mark them as sharp. That way when you go to subdivision surface, everything will be smooth except for the very edges. Select the tips of all the pleats at the bottom of the skirt and pull them up. And then with proportional editing, grab a vert on each side and pull it up. You might have to scroll your wheel to get your proportional editing to where it needs to be, but what we're looking for is kind of a droopy half circle. Same thing as the lapel, just take a single vert and extrude it around her neck, and then around the edge of the blazer, add a solidify modifier, subdivision surface, smooth it, kind of raise the neck part of the collar up, that way it kind of looks like it's going up and then folding down. Add a little bit more definition to the knees. Yeah, as you explore your model and you're going around it working on things, you'll see things here and there, and you always go in and work on things, little bitty things, adding details, fixing things, because once your mind gets off of it for a little while and you come back to it, you're going to see that something that once looked right doesn't look so right anymore. Select everything below the ankle and duplicate it. That way we can add a solidify modifier and make it into a shoe. Select everything above the ankle up to the knee. Separate it, add a solidify modifier. Not as thick as the shoe. These are going to be our socks. Next, select a square on the shoe. Separate it, solidify it, but not as thick as the shoe. This is our tongue. Still a little bit of the geometry from the tongue to make the strap to the shoe. Now, since our rig wasn't perfectly rigged and we didn't weight paint it or anything, our finger deformations look kind of weird. We'll go in there and manually fix that. We'll puff up the tips of the fingers to make them more frog-like. And for the bends of the fingers, we'll kind of flatten out the edges. That way they don't look so rounded and tube-like. And we'll use the scrape brush to scrape them, kind of squaring them off just a little bit more. Now let's work on our hair bow. By default, the path takes the shape of a circle, but we want it to have more of a triangular shape. So we'll add a path and we'll shape it into like a squished diamond, apply it to the bow, and we'll scale it down to make it look more like Sue's hair. I was having a little bit of trouble remeshing her side bangs. The geometry kept on shattering, so I had to replace those with pads and then convert them to meshes. Combine all of her hair parts, the front and the sides and the back, and remesh them in sculpt mode in order to make them one complete piece of geometry. Then start smoothing out the transitions. Using Draw Sharp, start adding in some hair strands. If you're having trouble adding long strands in the stroke options, you can turn on Stabilize. I couldn't get the bottom part of her ponytail to look the way I wanted it to, so what I ended up doing was just trashing it and starting over with pads. I made a square shape and used it as a reference for the path, and added a whole bunch of them together, kind of like the bristles of a broom, putting them all together and then remeshing them. That way they all merge together. And then I used the scrape tool in sculpt mode to kind of kill all the edges, and it inadvertently kind of gave it like a painted look. Little details is about all that's left. So let's go to the bottom of the foot. We'll go around it with a single vert and turn it into a plane, and I'll split it down the middle. Do the same thing for the other foot. Add a solidify modifier. That way we've got the sole of the shoes. We'll select the back faces of the heel, extrude them out, and I was gonna leave it this way, but it kinda looked weird because that's not how shoes work at all. So what we do is we select the sole and the shoe, go into edit mode, select the heel and the heel of the shoe, and with proportional editing turned on, we'll drag it up, and that will create our heel. Move the tips of the shoes in the right spot. We'll take a single plane, drag it up, subdivide it, use snapping, get it on our shoulder to make those shoulder jackety things. Once we have one done, we can duplicate it and flip it over, get it in position, put it on the other side. All that's left are buttons. So let's put a button up on the shoulder. She's got a lot of buttons. If you look at her references, she's got a lot of buttons. She's got a button on each one of her shoulders. She's got 2 buttons on her jacket, one that's buttoned and then one that's not buttoned. And then she's got 2 more buttons on each side of her arm, on her sleeve. And she's even got a button right in the middle of her, her tie. Could you imagine waking up and having to fasten that many buttons. I'm more of a Velcro guy myself, or zippers. Zippers are good. Oh, hey, would you look at that? We're done. Kind of a boring pose though, is what I was thinking when I made this thing a week ago. So let's go back and let's do another pose. After I made the actual armature, I saved a separate file, just in case. Luckily, I need that file now. So what I did was I jumped into Photoshop and I sketched out a little pose. This is kind of what I would like. Thank you for not laughing at my drawing. But yeah, that's what we're gonna shoot for. So let's get back into pose mode and let's get her to where we want her to be. Looking like a crane kick right now. So yeah, the original pose looked a little bit boring. She's just standing there with her finger in her mouth. A typical character design, this is what my character looks like pose. But this time we're going to go with more of an action shot. We want to get a cool action pose with her tongue sticking out. So we'll kind of give her one of these. I was thinking about going with like just a straight out Spider-Man pose. But when I was looking at the action figures of Asui, she really, if you pay attention to them, they really don't look like Spider-Man poses. They look more like a playfulish frog pose. So that's what I kind of tried to go for here. And I'm trying to move things around in the right spot because, like I said before, once you have the pose, you're pretty well locked in. And we're changing the mouth right now because instead of having a closed mouth, you gotta have an open mouth if you got a tongue shooting out of it at 90 miles per hour or kilometers or whatever. So a cool thing is if you want to add a cavity like her mouth, what you can do is you can create a mask in the shape that you want her mouth to be. Invert the mask, and then with the grab tool you can hold down control and just move your mouth and it will push it inwards, and that's how I created the inside of her mouth. And now that we have a whole different mouth to work on, we have to smooth it up, make it pretty, making some teeth out of a flattened out circle. The tongue is just a really long path. I think I subdivided maybe 2 verts so I can get some extra verts in there, just so I can have the tongue coming out of the mouth at a straight shot. Make the tongue big at the mouth and then big at the tip and small everywhere else. And since the end of a path isn't rounded off, all you can really do is cap them off. I put a little sphere right at the tip. So yeah, this is the final shape that I'm going to go with. This is the final pose that I'm going to go with. So let's start working on her hero costume. She's got these really big cuffs that are a part of her gloves, so it's pretty easy just to use a cylinder, add some loop cuts in the middle, squeeze them down to kind of give them a form. I took one plane and I subdivided a bunch, cut out the middle pieces, stuck it against the glove. I'm kind of thinning out the walls of this thing and rounding over the edge. Getting it in position, add a solidify modifier along with subdivision. Subdivision goes first, that way when the solidify happens, it's going to come straight out instead of rounded so much. Now I'm trying to poof out the cuff into the buckle a little bit and actually make the clasp of the buckle, it's just a plane with solidify and subdivision. So for her big old boots, I started from her upper thigh, selected all the verts down to her feet, and then duplicated them, separated them, added a solidify modifier to make them bigger, and then I filled in all the gaps of her legs, her hands, and her neck, and we will remesh her body. That way we can start sculpting on it. I'm going to bridge the gap between her boobs because there ain't no cleavage in her outfit, and because of the deformation that happened during the posing of the rigged model, we lost some butt cheek action. So we're going to kind of fill in that butt cheek. Define a lot of pieces of the body, add those collarbones in, the neck muscles or whatever, and I keep coming around to puffing up her butt cheeks. Once the sculpting's where you want it, quad remesh it again, and then I separated the neck and actually scaled the neck down. That way it looks like she's got a neckline in her costume that transitions over to her fleshy neck. Add multi-res modifier to the body, that way we can add the details back in. Add the creases, puff things out, flatten things out, curve things out things out, out, onto her belt. It's just a cylinder that's squished way down and then transformed into position. Kind of got to squish it here and there. And then I duplicated it and I stretched it out. That way it can make it past the outside of the thing. Used a Boolean modifier and applied it, and that makes the inside of it cut out whatever shape it was that it was referenced to, which was the same thing, only smaller. That's how I get kind of a belt shape. Now her belt has holes all the way around it, so I take a cylinder, make it really long, that way it can go through both sides, and I place it in each spot I want a hole to be. And when I get them all positioned just right, add a Boolean modifier, apply it to all those cylinders in the middle, and it will cut out the holes for the belt. Next up, she's got these stripes on her outfit, and rather than paint them in with textures, I'm actually going to model the stripes. So we'll take a single vert, we'll extrude it all the way up, make the shape of the stripe, and then fill in the faces. And one thing I didn't take into account for is that it's a black stripe that's bordered by 2 yellow stripes. So I actually made the stripe a little too narrow. So what I had to do was I followed around this single stripe on both sides in order to make it thick enough to have the yellow parts of the stripe, which was kind of a pain because it's like I had to do this thing 3 times. So starting on the right side of the stripe, I made it a little bit easier on myself. I just made the stripe maybe about twice as thick as I did the first one. And the reason why I did this is because I can add loop cuts along the sides and I can just use those for the yellow instead of having to go up and down the thing 2 more times. But there's the stripes, and it's already starting to make the character look a whole lot better. Next up, we're gonna make this kind of, I don't know what it is. She doesn't have guns, so it's not a gun holster. It's not a vest either. It's some sort of boob holster thing that she's got. Well, she's got it, and it kind of goes around the front, loops around her arms and into the top. I'm trying to move things into position to make room for these 2 little blocky pieces that are on her chest. That's a part of this harness thing. Bevel the edges to kind of round it out. And now, in order to connect the 2 straps to the bottom piece, I changed the snapping mode to project to self as well as project to surfaces or to faces. Drug them down and then turned off snapping so I can kind of pull them out just a little bit. And now it kind of gives the look that it's going around her arms and snapping to the front of them. And then she's got like these little bitty buttons, which I'd imagine that's how you wear this thing. But there's these 2 little button things. Alright, so we're working on the little frog pads on her feet. This is my least favorite part of her design. I think it's kind of ugly. But we gotta throw it in there because that's part of her design. So for the little frog feet pad things, you take a circle, flatten out the bottom, then add another circle and put it at the bottom of it to make the ring around it. Spread them out. She's got 3 on the front. Spread those out as if they were frog toes. And I've got to squish the point of the toes down to make room for the frog, I guess. It's not, don't want to say frog shaft. The frog toes. So yeah, here's the frog toes. It's just a sphere that clips into the feet. And I have to move the feet around just a little bit so, you know, they can get the right plumpness of the toes. Add a sphere, put it on the back of her heel, extrude it down, make it skinny, and then at the bottom, make it big and fat. And those are her frog heels. Copy it, throw it on the other heel. It's done. Copy the toes. Spend at least 5 minutes trying to get them to the other side. The frog toes are done. Let's move the mouth around a little bit. Reposition her eyes, because the eyes are in the pose for the last character, or the last pose that we did. Add multi-res to the hands, that way we can start sculpting in the glove details. This is probably my favorite part of this whole sculpt, was doing the glove details. I don't know what it is about it. I love doing the folds and the creases and stuff like that. It's really fun. I don't know. It's kind of meditative. Add some folds to the boobs, the butt, the neck, the arms, other places, you know, where things fold at. Add some folds there. So we got some more stripes to add to her outfit because she's eat up with stripes. She's got so many damn stripes. There's these V shapes on her legs that goes down her thighs right past her knees. So it's the same thing with the stripes on her torso. Just do the same thing. Add a little bit more detail to the cuffs. And she has these little green balls that's on her ankles for some reason. I don't know what they do, but they're there. Now we can start working on the hair. And I just took the triangle piece that was already there and multi-resed it so I could start sculpting in some lines to give some definition to the hair. And I learned my lesson last time. I'm not going to be able to remesh her side bangs, so I'm using paths to put in extra side bangs. But I'm thinking of doing it a different way this time. I'm going to be able to flatten it out. I'm going to flatten out the inside pieces of it with a scrape brush. That's my plan. So I'm going to get everything in place. I'm going to convert the path to a mesh, add a multi-res multiplier, bring it up to 3 like I usually do, and as soon as I touch my scrape brush to it, Blender crashes. I go back, see if I can recover it, but my dipper model is the last thing that's on my recovery file. So apparently the last time I saved was an hour before where it crashed. So I lost about an hour's worth of work. So I redid that work, and when I got to the hairpiece again, I'm going to try that same technique again, but Blender crashes. So I'm thinking, okay, I can't use a scrape brush on a path that was just converted to a mesh, so what I'm going to have to do is remesh it through sculpt mode. That way I can flatten it out. And thank God it works this time. We can get back to working on the hair. So I'll flatten out the insides that are closer to her face so it's not gonna clip into it. And I kind of make the outside of their side bangs more of a triangular shape this time. I'm not gonna worry about individual strands coming down because that was a lot of work and it didn't really look all that great. I'm just gonna focus mostly on adding strand details on the sides and on the top. So now we're gonna work on her weird goggle helmet thing, which looks really weird and is not it's okay, I think it's pretty ugly. But what I did was I took a cylinder and I brought it up to her head and got it into the spot that I needed to be in. I deleted the back faces off of it and the top and the bottom faces, formed it into shape, and then added a solidify modifier, and then I applied it. I added some bevels, and then I scaled them down in order to make those little creases in it. And it took a little bit of tuning to get this thing the way that I wanted it to. Take a single vert, extrude it all the way around her head to get the back band, add a solidify modifier, and apply it. And then select verts every now and again, bevel them, select the middle of those bevels, scale them down. Puff the hair out to make it fit around the buckle thing. Quad remesh the face, added a multi-res modifier, that way I could work on the lips and around the eyes just a little bit, touch them up, but mainly to get the topology down. Take a single vert, extrude it around her face to make, I don't even know what this is. It's some sort of football players keep the sun out of your eyes thing, but she's in the water all the time, so it doesn't make any sense. I have no idea. Added another material to the head and selected the mouth faces and changed it to the same material as the tongue, except I took the shininess away from it. Now to make the goggle parts, it's just a cylinder, bevel the end of it to make it more rounded, extrude in, extrude out, and then extrude back in. And it's got a crease up the side of it, so what I did was I picked one of the edges that went all the way, I beveled it, and then I scaled it down to make some sharp edges to make that crease in the goggle. Added a sphere for the lens, made it super shiny, scaled it down on the y-axis to flatten it out a little bit. I'm going in for a test fit, but it isn't working just right, so I'm going to try to curve it in, because I'm pretty sure hers is curved in, but I'm mainly just curving it in, that way it'll fit onto the headband right. So with a little bit of prying, you can get that on there just right, a little bit of shaping up, doesn't have to be perfect. A little bit of tweaking and smoothing out. The cool thing is you only got to do it once. Duplicate it, and then flip it, and just place it on the other side. A little bit of editing since both sides aren't perfectly mirrored. And now since we've already made the bow and the bottom part of her hair, I'm just going to nab it from the other model that we had earlier, and we'll just drop it in on this one. We'll stretch the hair out to make it connect, and we can start working on the hair strands. Now that we have all the light details done, do a quick 360 to look around, see if there's anything wrong with the image. I ended up taking that green band around her face and taking it on around her head just to make things fill out, just in case you catch a glimpse of an edge or something where it doesn't make it all the way. I went ahead and extruded it way past her hair. And to finish things off, I put a little white circle in her eyes. And that is it. There she is, Froppy, in her hero outfit this time, with her big old tongue sticking out, ready to lick crime and do hero stuff. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed the fact that we did 2 poses this time instead of just 1. You can find all my updates and things that I tweet about on Twitter, where I usually post works in progress and finished images, usually a week before I get to make a video on them. I also started using ArtStation for the first time. I don't know much about it or why I'm even there, but I'm on there, so go check me out on there. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you maybe next week.